What happens when a symbol of resistance and social justice like Colin Kaepernick faces discrimination at a place meant for global movement and connection? Last night, a routine flight to an international speaking engagement became a powerful moment of confrontation. Stay tuned as we uncover the story of what transpired, the outcry it sparked, and how Colin used the incident to amplify a larger conversation. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay informed with stories that challenge norms and inspire change. The terminal buzzed with the usual pre-flight chaos, rolling suitcases, announcements crackling over intercoms, and travelers rushing to gates. Colin Kaepernick, dressed casually in a black hoodie, sneakers, and a simple backpack slung over his shoulder, exuded a quiet confidence as he approached the check-in counter. Having spent years under the spotlight both on the field and off, he had grown accustomed to attention, whether supportive or critical. But today, he was here for work, a keynote address on the power of activism and allyship. As Colin handed over his passport and ticket, the agent behind the counter hesitated. Her eyes flickered to his name on the screen, then back to him, her expression betraying a hint of discomfort. "Excuse me, Mr. Kaepernick," she said, her voice tight. "Could you please wait here for a moment? I need to check something." Colin raised an eyebrow, but nodded, stepping aside. He noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere, whispers, glances, and an unmistakable tension. A nearby traveler pulled out their phone, snapping a picture. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, a uniformed security officer arrived, accompanied by a manager. The officer's tone was formal, almost rehearsed. "Mr. Kaepernick, we're going to need to conduct additional screening before you can proceed." Colin's jaw tightened. "And what's the reason for this?" "It's just a routine procedure," the officer replied, avoiding direct eye contact. Colin knew better. His silence was pointed, but his mind raced routine. All was his name, and the weight of what it represented, the true reason. As he was led to a separate room, murmurs followed him. "Isn't that the American football player?" someone whispered. "You know, the one who kneeled." The secondary screening was invasive and unnecessary. Bags were emptied, questions were asked repeatedly, and his demeanor was scrutinized. Colin answered with calm resolve, but inside, a familiar frustration churned. After an hour of delays, the manager returned, offering a half-hearted apology. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding, Mr. Kaepernick. You're free to go." Colin studied the man's face. "A misunderstanding, or something else entirely? Because I've done nothing wrong, yet I've been treated like a threat." The manager stammered, but Colin didn't wait for an answer. Gathering his things, he moved toward his gate, the experience lingering in his thoughts. On board, the whispers continued, but Colin blocked them out, reflecting instead on the larger issue at play. This wasn't just about him. It was about every individual who had ever been judged, detained, or demeaned for who they were or what they stood for. By the time he landed, Colin had made up his mind. Settling into his hotel room, he drafted a post for social media. "Today, I was reminded that no matter how far we think we've come, the journey toward equality isn't over. Airports are meant to connect us, but bias divides us. Let's demand better, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. #Dignity Matters." The post went viral within hours, sparking conversations across platforms. Travelers of all backgrounds shared similar experiences of racial profiling and discrimination, while activists rallied behind Colin's call to action. The morning after the incident, Colin sat at the edge of his hotel bed, scrolling through the flood of messages on his phone. Social media was ablaze. Supporters voiced outrage, calling the airport's actions a blatant example of racial profiling. Critics, predictably, dismissed it as an overreaction. Colin wasn't new to the storm of public opinion. He'd faced this dichotomy countless times since the anthem protests. Yet, as he absorbed the outpouring of stories from ordinary people who had faced similar treatment, he felt a profound sense of purpose. One message stood out. A father of two wrote, "My sons and I were detained for hours at an airport because of our Muslim names. Reading about your experience gave me the courage to speak up. Thank you for being a voice for us." The words resonated deeply. For Colin, this wasn't just about him. It was about leveraging his platform to amplify the voices of those without one. That afternoon, Colin met with his team to strategize. His publicist suggested hosting a press conference, but Colin wanted to do more. "A press conference isn't enough," he said firmly, "we need action. Let's start by creating a campaign highlighting the real stories of those affected by discrimination in travel." His team got to work, and within days, the #FlightForEquality initiative was born. Through videos, testimonials, and data-backed research, the campaign shed light on the systemic biases ingrained in airport security practices. Back at the airport, the ripple effects of Colin's story were beginning to take shape. Journalists camped outside the terminal, interviewing travelers who shared their own experiences of unfair treatment. The airline and airport security issued carefully worded statements, promising investigations and reforms, but the pressure was mounting. Civil rights organizations called for sweeping changes to how screenings were conducted, particularly for travelers of color and those with non-Western names. Meanwhile, Colin took the conversation beyond social media. He appeared on major talk shows, discussing the need for systemic reform in travel and beyond. In one interview, he said, "This isn't about me. It's about the everyday person who doesn't have a platform to speak out when they're wronged. Discrimination isn't an isolated incident, it's a pattern, and it's time we broke it." The campaign gained momentum, attracting endorsements from other public figures, including athletes, musicians, and activists. Celebrities like Serena Williams and Kendrick Lamar shared their own experiences of bias, creating a chorus of voices too loud to ignore. Months later, Colin was invited to address a congressional hearing on racial profiling in public spaces. Standing before a panel of lawmakers, he spoke with the same quiet resolve that had characterized his protests on the field. "The indignities I faced pale in comparison to what millions endure every day," Colin said. "This isn't just about airports or stadiums. It's about dismantling a culture that sees difference as a threat rather than a strength." His testimony was met with both applause and skepticism, but Colin didn't flinch. He had learned long ago that change rarely came without resistance. On the same day, Colin visited the airport where the incident had occurred. This time, he wasn't traveling, he was there to meet with the airline's executives and security personnel. In the boardroom, Colin didn't mince words. "You've apologized publicly," he began, "but what steps are you taking to ensure this doesn't happen again?" The airline's CEO outlined a series of measures, including mandatory anti-bias training and third-party audits of security practices. Colin listened intently, but made one thing clear: apologies are a start, accountability is the goal. The meeting ended with a mutual agreement to collaborate on further reforms, including the implementation of a traveler's Bill of Rights to protect against discrimination. Weeks later, Colin sat in the audience at a community forum hosted by the #FlightForEquality campaign. Story after story emerged, from a black businesswoman detained for questioning because she had too many suitcases, to an elderly Asian man harassed for not speaking English fluently. Colin listened intently, his heart heavy, but his resolve stronger than ever. As he took the stage, he said, Your stories remind me why this fight matters. Together, we can build systems that see our humanity before our differences. The campaign's success continued to grow, leading to tangible changes in airport policies nationwide. New screening protocols were implemented, and the conversation around discrimination in travel gained mainstream traction. Months later, Colin stood before another crowd, this time at the unveiling of a new initiative, a scholarship program for young activists fighting systemic bias. Activism isn't a moment, it's a movement, Colin said as he addressed the audience. We need the next generation to keep pushing, keep speaking, and keep believing in the possibility of change. As he stepped off the stage, Colin felt a familiar sense of fulfillment. He had turned a moment of indignity into a catalyst for change, proving once again that resistance, when guided by purpose, could move mountains. Back in his hotel room, Colin reflected on the journey. The fight against discrimination was far from over, but every story shared, every voice raised, and every system challenged brought them closer to a world where dignity wasn't conditional. That night, as Colin scrolled through social media, he saw the hashtag Flight for Equality trending globally. The stories of everyday people, their triumphs, struggles, and unyielding hope filled his screen. Colin smiled. He knew the journey ahead would be long, but moments like these reminded him why he had chosen to kneel all those years ago, to stand for something greater. Don't forget to like this video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories that inspire and provoke thought. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.